So the previous video I posted on this car, I was explaining how I have a P0300 code. I got a random misfire, and this video is basically doing all the diagnosis process, checking this and checking that until I eventually do find the issue. I checked just about everything that could possibly cause a random misfire. So if you're also hunting down a random misfire or a P0300 or even various other misfire codes, you might want to stay tuned, pay attention throughout the entirety of this video because I show you pretty much everything to check for that.
Well, I think I found the issue here. Oddly, when I pull these, it doesn't really change the way it runs or sounds. You can hear it's got spark. But it doesn't really seem to change the way that it runs. Maybe that's because it's a 6-cylinder instead of a 4-cylinder, so it's got enough rotational inertia to where it doesn't really matter at idle. Okay, see, it still didn't really change, and here's the spark. Be able to hear it. Now when I pull this one, same thing, doesn't really change the way it's running, but the clicking sound, I hear it back there, so I think it's arcing out on something. See, now it's ticking, even though it's not. If I hold it just right, I can get it to arc out there. But with this off, you can hear it ticking back in there.
So electricity takes the path of least resistance, and on this particular wire down in there, it was making contact with one of the metal components down in there. So when I unplugged it from the spark plug, it was arcing outside of the wire against that metal component. But when you put it back down on the spark plug, the path of least resistance is straight to that spark plug, so that would not cause a misfire with it actually plugged in like it should be. Now if I still heard the ticking back there with it plugged in properly on top of the spark plug like it should be, then we would definitely have an arcing issue. And a good way to check that is just wait till it's dark and let her run, and you should be able to spot the arc in pitch black. Now, having unplugged all three of those spark plugs on the front head there, and it did not change the way the car ran, that told me my misfire was on that front head there, and apparently on all three cylinders. Now this is a new cap, rotor, and wires, but I pulled this off anyways just in case to inspect. I did not find anything wrong because process of elimination, I gotta start somewhere. So cap and rotor are good as they should be because they're all new. Wires are good because they're new. But then I got seriously distracted by the racket coming from inside the engine here, which could have been the notorious lifter tick that these engines have if you don't change the oil often enough, or it could have been related to something else I found later in this video.
Hopefully you can hear it rattling around.
So you can see how horrible that sounds and why I was distracted by that from a moment. I was fearing the worst, like I dropped the valve or something like that. I don't know, something broke, whatever. But here I was also discussing how, in the previous video I was discussing I had a code for a lean condition on the rear bank, but that ended up not affecting anything. It was just another random issue that had nothing to do with this. So, initially with having that random misfire code and then also having a code for lean something or other on that rear bank, I assumed my issue was on the rear until I started unplugging the spark plugs from the front, and then realized that the issue was on the front bank, thank God, because you got to take off that whole dual intake manifold there and all that crap attached to it to get to that rear head. But taking those plugs out of the front and nothing changing told me it was the front. So that lean code on the rear bank really screwed me up there for a while, and it was just coincidence really. It had nothing to do with the random misfire, but I did not know that at the time. It most likely has something to do with the oxygen sensors, and I dive into that a little bit later in this video. And oddly, after the car warmed up, that ticking sound stopped.
doesn't really tick and clack like it did. Now these engines were pretty notorious for lifter noise if you didn't change the oil often enough. This one never had it, but I'm wondering if that's what it was. But when it was cold, it was making all kinds of clacking sound. Now that it's warmed up, not so much. I mean, it almost sounds normal other than it's misfiring, but when it was cold, it was making all kinds of noise, making it sound like something was loose in the valve train on the back. I really don't know. I'm gonna check codes though again. As soon as I pulled out, the light came on. See what it says this time, see if it's anything different. I'm also gonna read the live feed data, see what I can see in there.
Just to further solidify that the problem was on the front half of the engine, just as how I pulled each plug out one at a time to see if it changed the way it ran, and it did not. With my scanner here, you can turn off each injector one at a time. Every time I turned off one of the injectors on the front, literally nothing changed, but when I turned off one of the injectors on the back of the engine, it always changed. So this just further solidified what I already tested under the hood by pulling off each plug wire one at a time, that our issue is definitely on the front half, and it was all 3 cylinders on the front.
And then what did I see here? A lot of times you see, okay, that doesn't look right, this doesn't look right. Well, usually the car's not running right. A lot of things aren't going to look right.
And I'll just voice over here again because this is a lot of footage, and I can just compress it all real quickly here for what we actually need to know. So I was checking the O2 sensor readings and fuel trim and whatnot, and basically in conclusion is that most, if not all, of my O2 sensors are pretty crappy. They're not really working the way they're supposed to. The O2 sensors reads the air-fuel ratio after it exits the cylinder, and then it reports back to the computer to tell it whether it's right or wrong and in which direction it's right or wrong. And then the computer makes the necessary adjustments to make it run as efficiently as possible. And again, with this thing misfiring, it's obviously going to pick up some weird crap, at least on that front half of the engine there, because it is not burning the air and fuel correctly. So naturally it's going to pick up some weird readings from that regardless.
This thing, like, I don't know, it must just be at idle, but like going down the road, it's got pretty decent power. There's no way it's only running on 3 cylinders, but it's, I guess, not running right on those cylinders, I guess. So I'm gonna have to start with, Jesus Christ. You would be inclined to believe it's a fuel issue because it's brand new plugs, brand new wires, brand new cap and rotor. But if the right thing fails in the distributor, and God, I don't know if there could be other issues like a manifold or leaks or something could potentially cause a misfire. It's really strange that it's across all 3. So I am going to lean towards a fuel issue. And of course, there was some odd fuel readings in the live data. But I don't know. I got to do some research to see if I can get this figured out. And actually, scratch that. A little light bulb just went off my head. I did the screwdriver method. Place it down here on your injector, put this in your ear hole, and you can hear the injector pulsing. All 3 of them are pulsing, so it shouldn't be a fuel issue then, unless it's like pressure or something, or they're somehow all 3 of them are gunked up, which I really doubt. So like I said, this thing's just always throwing me curveballs, but at least with it being on the front here, I can do a compression test on these cylinders and see if something's up with them. I mean, the exhaust is clear, and I even have an exhaust leak right up in the engine bay there on the downpipes, and there's no fog or anything like that coming out. No, nothing at all, actually. No black smoke, no fog, nothing. So shouldn't be a head gasket or anything like that. So it's really odd. How are we getting a misfire in all 3 cylinders? And it's constant even at idle if I'm getting spark and fuel. So we're definitely getting spark. I'm going to have to check my fuel pressure regulator here on this rail here for this head, see if it's working properly or not. Other than that, there's a few other things it could be. I just got a vacuum gauge, so I'm going to check the vacuum. It could be a clogged cat. There's a pre-cat up in this thing. This actually has a hole in the exhaust, and if it's in the right spot, I might be able to like feel the airflow to see if it's adequate or not, to see that might be able to confirm for me there whether or not it's a cat. But I can also do so with the vacuum gauge, and we'll check vacuum. I'm going to do that in this video, which could also help me confirm whether or not the cat is clogged. Could be a faulty O2 sensor down there, even though I'm not getting a check engine light for the O2. I'm definitely getting some weird readings on the O2, but you would also get weird readings on the O2 sensors if she's not running right. So that doesn't necessarily mean it's an O2 sensor. Could also be something messed up in the wiring somewhere, or it could even be the ECU, but we're going to start with the easiest things first. Process of elimination, diagnosing why exactly I'm having this issue. So I guess we'll start with checking the vacuum, since I just ordered this and just got it in a couple hours ago exactly for this. So I'm going to pull this line on. Ah! Put a link in the description if you want to get yourself one of these. It's only like 20 bucks. It does carburetors and something else as well. Fuel system, I believe, for fuel pressure. But I'll start the car, let the idle come down, and then I'm going to pop this little vacuum line off the side of the intake here, and we'll hook it up to there. Alright, I'm about to hook this up. Vacuum can be a little different from car to car, but should be somewhere, I believe these are the numbers here. It goes up to 28 right here. There's no marking for it, but that's the vacuum. 15, 20, 25. Should be somewhere between 20 and 25, and we give it a little bit of RPM, it should stay around there or rise a little bit. If it drops when I do that, then it could indicate that that catalytic converter is clogged up. Yeah, the hose is too big. I'm going to have to squeeze that or zip tie it or something. Alright, I got it zip tied up there. Doesn't sound like it's leaking. Might be a little bit. Anyways, we're about 17, 18 there. So hold RPMs now.
So I was a little misled by this at first, thinking that the cat was indeed clogged, because as you can see there, the vacuum dropped 1 or 2 psi. However, I needed to hold the RPM higher. I'm not sure where I was holding it, somewhere under 2, but you need to hold it at either 2 or 2,500 RPM, somewhere in there. And then you maintain that idle for 30 seconds, 40 seconds, whatever. And basically, if your cat's clogged, if you're holding idle, you're holding 2,500 RPMs, if the cat's clogged, you should see that needle slowly but continually drop pressure, not just stay there stationary like what mine did. But also part of the reason for this was because I did not rev it high enough. So I tried it again later and held the revs higher, and if I recall correctly, it looked a little more normal. Plus it did not, continue to drop off pressure like it would if your cat was bad. Also, I did not hold the RPMs for long enough here either. I just saw the needle drop and I was like, oh, well, I guess my cat's bad, and that is not the correct way to do it.
Here should be able to pop off this vacuum line and should not have any fuel come out, which I did not. Okay, so now I'll try it with it running as well. Yeah, nothing.
Upon further research, just pulling it off for a second here may not always show you if your diaphragm's bad. It depends on how bad it is. What you want to do is unplug it for even up to 5 minutes if you have to. It might take a few minutes before it starts leaking out fuel. It just depends on the tear and the diaphragm itself. So don't just pull it off like I did here and be like, oh, yep, it's good because it's not leaking fuel. It may take a few minutes, which I did later do, and I still did not have a fuel leak. From the diaphragm, that is. If I did, then you would have potential loss of fuel pressure there, or create some kind of weird vacuum crap in there that would cause the car to run wrong.
So the diaphragm in that fuel pressure regulator or valve or whatever is good. Test for a intake manifold leak. You can spray some starting fluid or something like that down in there, and if the idle changes, that means there's a leak in the manifold because it's sucking that starting fluid in. Shouldn't be, because if you've seen I don't know how many videos ago, hasn't been too long, just a few months ago, I had this whole thing off, and so it's got new gaskets and everything, properly torqued and whatnot. I mean, shit happens, but that's how you would check that. So I should not have a leak there, but I'll go ahead and see if I can find some starting fluid, and I'll test that as well. Mine might be too low. I gotta go check it real quick. Alternatively, you could do a smoke test, get a big cigar, puff some smoke down in there and see if it, you know, you can see it pulling it in. The spray would probably work a little better, but if you don't want to coat everything in that crap, smoke test might work. Could be a bad head gasket as well. I'm going to check compression on it. I pulled the plugs and they all look like this, so they look fine. Yes, they're gapped properly. It's a 0.21 or something small like that because it's the higher compression GTS motor. They look okay, except for they look like they're wet. Now that misfiring all three of those cylinders, it would make sense that it would be wet if it's not burning the fuel. However, you would think it would smell like gas, and I smelled them, and it did not really smell like gas to me for some reason. So they can also be wet if you had like a blown head gasket, which again I'm testing here shortly with a compression test. Another way to check for that, obviously fog out the tailpipe, which I showed earlier. The car burns crystal clear out the muffler, so not burning any coolant there. Also check your oil dipstick tube, see if it looks muddy, and also you can pop the oil cap off there, see if it looks muddy down in there. If it does, that's because there's coolant mixed with the oil. By the way, it's crazy how light a torque spec on these plugs. It's only like 10 or 12 pounds or something like that, so it's extremely easy to strip those out. And actually right here is another clip of the exhaust that's running in this video. I was doing what's kind of stupid actually. I'll explain why in a second. Trying to check my pressure. You can also check clogged catalytic converter as long as you have no exhaust leaks by trying to cover the back of the exhaust pipe. It should have decent pressure if you hold, I don't know, 3,000 RPM, a little more maybe. If you press real hard, you'll be able to hold your hand on it, but you can tell there's definitely like good pressure coming out, like it's trying to get that exhaust gas out of there. However, if you have a big exhaust leak, especially, well, it doesn't really matter anywhere, but I got an exhaust leak big enough to stick my thumb through directly under the engine, then you're obviously going to have a pressure loss there, so doing this is kind of moot. But then also having this big 4-inch tip on here, that's going to give you a lot less pressure coming out the back than, you know, having a standard like 2-inch factory tip or something like that. So this is really, in hindsight, just kind of retarded on my end trying to do this. I don't know, I'm almost positive it's the cat, but just for shits and giggles, I'm going to go ahead and spray around the intake. So this is brake parts cleaner. You can see they're extremely flammable, so that's all you need is a flammable liquid, and preferably something that's going to dry quick like this. So I don't think this will do anything. Like I said, my gasket should be good because I replaced it myself literally just a couple months ago, but spraying dirt everywhere. No change. That was the front side, but I mean it's still in the atmosphere down there, so even if, you know, it shouldn't make its way to the back, but I'll try the back anyways. See, I got the straw on the back there. And yeah, no change, just like I think, or just like I thought. So that verifies that the front of the intake there is not leaking. So yeah, that's fun, but I'm gonna go ahead and run the compression test real quick, provided that my fitting fits in the threads down there. Yeah, that's really weird. As soon as I pulled that, I wasn't even trying to smell it, and just immediately like a puff of sweet smell comes out. It doesn't smell like coolant though. I think it might just be this rubber putting off that scent, getting hot with it being a new boot. But anyways, got my compression tester here. Test the compression real quick and find out for sure. $180. That's pretty good compression. I notice on both those I'm getting a popping sound towards the end as the pressure gets up there around 180, so I don't know if it's blowing past this rubber seal here on the pressure gauge, or if that's because, you know, the pressure's building up from that you know, cap being clogged, if that's the case. That one's 190. I wonder if that's because that, again, if the pressure's building up or whatever, but still within spec. 180, 190 across the board. That's really good compression. And then those two being 180 and that one being about 190, that's within 10%. That's about actually right on the dot. They're holding too. I noticed the gauge, it's not dropping. You know, it's not leaking off pressure, all three cylinders. So yeah, I'm going with Cat. All right, unbolted, loosened my heat shield here. There was a piece right there, came off the top. So I can get a line wrench around this. I'm gonna keep spraying this with my PP blaster, hit it a few times over the next half hour, then get a line wrench around that, hopefully break it free. I might try running it for a second open. I don't think it's gonna melt this coolant pipe that quick. And then if my misfire is gone, that's a pretty good indicator that the pre-cat down here is clogged. But I'm also going to try to get my pressure gauge in there and see if I can get a read on the pressure to see if it's too high or not, which will tell us for sure if that cat's bad. And when I say bad, I mean clogged, because there's a lot of information like how to check for a bad cat symptoms. Well, when they say bad, generally they mean that it's inefficient, so it's not you know, taking the pollutants out like it's supposed to. And they'll measure that with a heat gun, front and rear, depending on your temperature, front and rear. Will tell you whether or not it's bad, but that does not tell you if it's clogged. The pressure is what will tell you whether it's clogged or not. The temp gun does not tell you if it's clogged, unless it's so severely clogged to the point that it's like completely overheating. Then that might tell you, but at that point you could probably see it glowing red in the dark. All right, finally got that jerk out. There she is there. So this is what a line lock looks like. So it gives you as much possible grip. You do not want to use a regular box hand. It's just going to slip it around. And I got it over and turned it. That's the other thing. I'm going to make sure it's nice and flat all the way down around the nut. I got as far as I could. I was hitting the radiator here, and then I couldn't quite get it back over again, but it's because this shield was hitting my wrench. So I just bent that lip out a little bit, and then I was able to get it in there and power that thing out. Sorry for the foggy picture. I got grease on the phone. I keep trying to wipe it off and it's just smearing it. I'm kind of curious though if my misfire's gone with that out, because again, I'm suspecting that cat is clogged potentially. So I'm gonna run it like that. I do have this wire here, so I'm gonna get some foil and put over that. I know it's not gonna like burn through this pipe in just a few seconds, but I am gonna cover these wires here just in case, because it's gonna be shooting flame out of there. All right, it might be a little hard to tell because it's gonna be loud, but try it for 20-30 seconds, see if I notice any difference. I don't know, it seems like it's still misfiring. I don't want to get in front of that thing, but well, it sure seems like it's still misfiring, so I don't know if it's that cat like I thought. I'm still going to try to get my pressure gauge in there. Now, if the cat, it could be, I was thinking it was this one, if any, because again, we're having the misfire across these three cylinders only. So, you know, if it was the other cat on the other side, that wouldn't cause that. At least it shouldn't. If anything, it would cause that side to misfire, and that side is not misfiring. The cat further down could be clogged. Even your muffler could be clogged if it shot pieces of the cat out. But the fact that only this head is misfiring and that one seems to be running fine, again, that would indicate, if any, that this cat is clogged. But it still seems to be misfiring, so I don't know. This thing only has 138,000 or 140 or something like that, so you wouldn't think the cat would fail that quickly, although some of them have been known to fail at less than 100,000, especially if your car's not running right. Which, since I got this thing, it has not been running right 90% of the time. So
but I'm gonna see if I can get my pressure gauge in there and get a read on that.
I can actually see down in there. It'd be like impossible to show you guys on camera with everything in the way, but I can see the top of the cat and that thing looks flawless. But I'm gonna go ahead and hook up that pressure gauge just in case. Maybe it's deeper down in, maybe it's at the bottom, maybe it's one of the others, I don't know. If a blockage is causing this cylinder, the misfire though, then we should get, you know, pressure coming up through this manifold. So check the pressure on this real quick. It should only be like 1.5 at idle, and then if you hold sustained 2,500 RPM, it should stay under 3 psi. So if it hits 3 or if it's over, then there's definitely a blockage in the exhaust system somewhere.
Alright, 0, so that looks good. Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So then when we hold RPMs, we'll know for sure. Although at idle it looks good.
Fun. This whole time I was, oh, it's the cat. Oh, it's the cat. Nope. So the pressure's good there. Not even 1 psi, even with sustained RPM. So there's absolutely no clog in the exhaust system. So I don't think it's the math, because it should be all cylinders, or at least the front and back, not just this front head on all 3. But we'll try unplugging that, see if it runs better. Not run better, it runs worse, so that should indicate mass airflow is working. Might die when I plug it back in now. As you can see, clearly better with the mass airflow, so the mass airflow is working properly. Really the only thing I'm leaning towards at this point, because everything else checks out as far as I can tell, is the O2 sensors, because I got some weird reads on that, and because of those reads it is certainly adjusting the fuel trim vastly different on one bank compared to the other, and the other bank doesn't look great either. But the only thing that doesn't make sense to me, if it was the O2 sensor, and maybe I'm missing something here, but when you first start the car dead cold, it runs an open loop because the O2 sensors don't start working until they hit a certain temperature. And I have the misfire immediately upon startup, so the immediate startup should take the O2 sensors out of the equation.
And this is absolutely correct. I spent way too much time messing with the O2 sensors and looking at the live data and switching over to the graph chart and watching, just basically, like I said earlier in this video, they're not working right, but it shouldn't cause a misfire while the car is in open loop before it warms up. Because when you first start the car, the ECU bypasses your computer, that is, it bypasses the data from the oxygen sensors and just runs an open loop on preset parameters. So with that being the case, whether the O2 sensors are bad or not, it shouldn't make a difference. It should not misfire as soon as you start up the car via anything to do with the O2 sensors, because the car's not even using the O2 sensors for the first 30 or 60 seconds of it being started up, and I have an immediate misfire as soon as I fire it up on a dead cold engine.
There's really only one other thing it could be, which would be like if that cam skipped a tooth on the timing belt, but that should not be a possibility because I just replaced the water pump, timing belt, tensioner, and all that. I actually got a bad tensioner that was a new one. That's how attentive I am to this crap. I replaced the old tensioner with a brand new tensioner, and the brand new tensioner was defective, and we had a lot of slack, but thankfully it did not skip time again. I caught that new tensioner being defective. So then I bought one that was a known high quality name brand and was twice as expensive. So we got like the best freaking tensioner you could get in there, brand new belt. It was in time and everything. Everything's all new under the timing cover.
Sorry about those stupid ass birds. Those things drive me crazy. I wish I could go over there and stomp on every one of them.
So really there's no way in hell that thing should have skipped a tooth unless something odd or strange or weird or whatever's causing it. But I don't know. That's really the only last thing that's left would be like, other than I guess pulling the intake manifold to pull the fuel rail off and crank it over to make sure that side is, you know, squirting properly, because I don't think it would be a blockage.
Alternatively, there's places that can test your fuel injectors for flow. You could do it yourself as well, but to buy the machine, it's at least a few $100s.
It was kind of strange. I put some like fuel cleaner in here, injector cleaner, what have you, and it ran fine for days and days and days, and then suddenly that happened. So I, before I started doing all this diagnosis, I had contemplated, okay, well, did that cleaner, clean it out and break something loose, and then now we got a clog. But I don't think it would just happen to clog all 3 front injectors and only the 3 front injectors and not the rear. Again, especially with what I'm seeing on the data with the O2 sensors. And again, if it was a fuel filter, fuel pump, it should be doing it on both sides of the head, not just consistently all 3 cylinders on the front there. So I guess if the O2 sensors don't work, I could pull the intake manifold to pull the fuel rail and turn it over and watch them squirt, make sure it squirts the same as the back. I could test the fuel pressure, but that doesn't really tell me if the injectors are clogged or anything like that. So, and then like I said, highly unlikely because I just replaced all that. The timing belt could have skipped a tooth on that cam. If it was off a tooth, it could cause it to run like crap and misfire on that head. But like I said, that really should not be the case at all. Well, I hate to have to go through the hassle of checking this crap again for like the 3rd time now, but I gotta know that the timing's good on this thing. If you missed the previous videos, I skipped timing originally because the tensioner that was on it when I got it went bad, and then the replacement tensioner I put on there went bad like immediately and failed and let the belt get loose. Thankfully did not skip time then. I caught it in time because I had ended up having to do the water pump, so I put better name brand, top of the line, twice as expensive tensioner on there. Aizen, new belt, new water pump, new tensioner, Aizen tensioner, everything. So there's really no reason in hell it should have skipped time, but I gotta check it just to know. I mean, this could be the issue. I have no clue why it would skip time. I really doubt the Aizen failed as well, but I gotta tear into this thing just to make sure. You know what's awesome? It skipped time again, and that's exactly why I did this. I haven't got it lined up yet, but I can see this one needs to go 2 teeth to line up with the mark. This one's more than 2 teeth before it's going to line up. So yeah, skip time somewhere. Obviously that front head. Why did it skip time again? Is this new tensioner failed? Let's see how loose it is. It don't even seem loose, so why are we skipping time? So there's my new Aizen. You can see, does it say it right there? No, it must be on the other side, if it even says it at all. It's a Aizen. It's a freaking $50 tensioner. The first new one I put on was $25, and it failed like immediately. It didn't hold tension, so I bought another one, this Aizen, which was $50. That seems like good tension. Let's check up here. Yeah, it's tight. So how the hell do I have a tight timing belt and I skip time again? Let me get this thing lined up, double check. Okay, yep, lined up down there on that timing mark. It's gonna be difficult for you to see because all this crapping away and it's dark back there, but that one's lined up. This one's not. It skipped 2 teeth. How? Why? I mean, the obvious things. It's a brand new, good, name brand Gates, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to go back and check my old video, but I know about name brand timing belt because that's not something I take a chance on. We got a brand new, name brand, Aizen, $50 freaking tensioner down there, and it is tight this time around. Brand new water pump. That's Gates as well, I believe. It's fucking $50, $70 water pump, something like that. So the whole new timing kit, okay? Belt's good, water pump's good, tensioner's good. I know the other things you say is, what about the cam gears? All the cam gears look fantastic. Okay, I've been in this thing 3 times. The cam gears are good, and our gear drive down here is good. So why the hell is this thing skipping timing? I don't know if you can tell, but that's a fairly new idler pulley there, whatever you would call it too. And I checked it the last time I was in here, and that thing's good as well. So,
did you hear what I called it there? An idler pulley? Well, it's not exactly an idler pulley, and as I came to find out, this thing was actually the issue. More on that in just a second.
So all that work I did throughout, either this entire video or the past couple, 2 or 3 videos. I'm not sure how I'm going to cut this up yet. Probably just one big video. All that work for nothing because it skipped time when it shouldn't have, because everything's good. But see, it's a good thing I checked, because as much as I wanted to tell myself there's no way, because it's a new belt, it's a new water pump, it's a new tensioner, I know what's good. Well, it wasn't. As I was saying earlier in this video, everything else checked out. The fuel pressure, you know, the injectors were working, the fuel pressure regulator. I forgot how many things we've checked now. The freaking mass airflow sensor, good spark, just nothing made sense. My O2s don't look right, but as I said earlier in the video, when you first start the car, they run an open loop, so the O2 sensors don't matter as soon as you start the car. And I have the Misfire as soon as I start, so not really finding anything definitive. And I actually ordered the O2 sensors and then canceled my order about 5 hours later, because I was like, no, it doesn't make sense, because open loop when the car is warm, before when it's cold, excuse me, before the O2 sensors warm up, it does not use the data from the O2 sensors to make the car run right. It just runs an open loop on preset parameters. I got this freaking sweat bee pissing me off that's why the camera's wiggling around. Anyways, yeah, nothing came back like negative. I mean, the O2 readings are not good. They're old O2s, they probably need replaced, I'm sure, but that didn't make sense why it has a misfire as soon as it starts up, because the ECU does not use the data from the O2 sensors when the car's cold. So other than doing like an actual fuel pressure test and popping that fuel pressure regulator off and getting an adapter on there to test the pressure and whatnot, and pulling the intake and injectors and everything to have them squirt right in front of me to see if they were working properly, which I didn't have any doubt that they were. That was the only thing left, was a timing belt, even though there's no reason for it to be skipped a tooth there. So 2 teeth actually. There's 2 freaking idler pulleys. There's one down in here, and this one does not look nice and new, so that one has not been replaced. So is that thing sticking, seizing up, and that's what causing my belt to slip? It also just so happens to be right under the cam that it slipped on. I got to pull my tensioner to reset the timing on this thing, and I think I'm gonna go pull this freaking motor mount again, and that, oh god, that's gonna be a nightmare. I remember how much fun that was. Had to pull the alternator and everything to get the motor mount out, if I recall correctly. Maybe not. I at least have to unbolt it. Anyway, see if I can check that idler there. I'm thinking if I can't find anything, I just might replace both those idler pulleys, because that's the only thing on the timing cover side I haven't replaced since I got it. So I don't hear any like weird noises or anything like bearings going out on them or flopping or wobbling or anything like that. But other than that, I'm at a loss as to what the heck. It could be this thing ran like an absolute top until I just went to start it up one day, and then all of a sudden it just instantly ran like crap, so it skipped timing on startup. And now, if you made it clear to the end of the video, or if you skipped ahead to the end, which if you're trying to figure out a P0300 misfire code, you probably don't want to skip to the end, because you miss all the other things that could have been that I went over. But I think I finally found the issue, having dug into the timing belt over there, and like I was hitting on these guys. So this is the idler pulley right here that I was just talking about, that's like under the freaking motor mount. But I think the issue is this one right here. So these are both brand new, so I'm gonna go ahead and replace that idler anyways. That way it's just out of sight, out of mind, no longer a concern. So this is where the hydraulic tensioner would push on this arm to push this pulley against the timing belt for tension, right? Well, if these damn sweat bees would quit landing all over my face. I wondered why this thing looked weird with these 2 little holes here. This itself is in a sense a tensioner, because that's adjustable. Check this out. See how it spun out? You see how it's further away from that arm now compared to it being spun in? That's a tensioner as well. So you actually have a dual tensioner here, because you have that hydraulic tensioner here that pushes this arm forward towards the belt, but then this is also a tensioner because you're supposed to set it against the belt. And I'm going to show how to do that, I don't know, either in this video or a quick little 2-minute video following this perhaps. But basically what you're supposed to do
is you get this up in there, you get the tensioner behind it, but with the tensioner compressed, okay, to where it'll just kind of sit on that hydraulic tensioner, and then you spin this out and press it against the belt until the belt is nice and tight. Then you'll tighten that bolt down to hold that tension, and then you'll finally release the pin and the hydraulic tensioner behind this arm to press against it. Now I noticed, I went back through the footage on this very video, this was not pressed out like that. This was kind of in a downward position right around there roughly. And as I said previously in this video, this looks like a newer pulley, like it had been replaced before. And then also when I first took off my timing belt many videos ago, I commented on how the belt looked fairly new. So I believe someone did change the timing belt before I got it, and they didn't know, just like I didn't know until now, that you have to set the tension with this first and not just rely on the hydraulic tensioner there. So I do believe this is the issue the entire time. I believe that is why I still skip teeth again with a brand new hydraulic tensioner, brand new belt, brand new water pump, all that crap, because the tension on this pivoting pulley here was not set correctly. So time will tell, but I'm going to go ahead and replace this idler pulley under this motor mount here. Reset the timing belt and all that. I'm gonna have to turn that cam back a few teeth or whichever way it needed to go, get my timing set up correctly, and then this time I will be setting the tension with that pulley first there before releasing the hydraulic tensioner, so then I know it will be set properly, and then it's just a matter of time driving the car around, putting a few thousand miles on her and making sure it doesn't skip time again. But I do believe that that's the issue right there. I never seen no crap like that before, never heard of it. Apparently it's a Mitsubishi thing. I was even reading some threads where even people taking these cars in to the shop to have, you know, trained ASE certified mechanics work on them, even they mess them up. They'll go get a new timing belt and hydraulic tensioner and all that installed, and a few hundred miles later they skip time again and they can't figure it out. And apparently it's because even the technicians, a lot of the technicians don't know. You know, you see that hydraulic tensioner, and that's usually all any car has on a timing belt. It's just the hydraulic tensioner that goes behind it. So apparently even some shop techs are screwing this up because they don't know that they have to pivot that pulley out there to set tension as well. So I'll probably post a little 2 or 3 minute how-to video for the community after this, and then we'll just monitor it thereafter. But that should have been the issue, so it should finally be resolved once I get this thing back together. Then one of these days when I can finally keep this thing on the road for more than a week and I get my struts replaced, then we can finally do some hot rodding videos, 0 to 60 and throwing around some corners and whatnot. So now that she's all put back together, no more Misfire.